Greetings, math fans. All right, so this is Chapter 8, Day 3. Okay, so Chapter 8, Day 3. And our topic today is called Completing the Square. Completing the Square. So here's the deal. What I mean by completing the square is basically we're going to make it a perfect square. Okay, so it's a little weird term, okay, but let me just kind of show you how we're going to start this out. All right, the first couple problems I'm going to do is just to kind of get you going to the idea of what I need to do, all right? So if I have something like x squared plus 8x, what I need to do is I need some value here, okay, in order to complete the square. So again, I'll explain what complete the square is in a second, but the way we're going to get that value here, okay, I'm gonna make this in red, okay. In order to get this value here, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take half of this term, half of that x term, so half of 8, okay, and we're going to get 4. And then what we're going to do with that 4 is we're going to square it. All right, so if again, this is what I'm doing. I took half of 8, and then once I get that, we're going to square it. And once I get that value, that's going to be 16. Okay, 4 squared is 16, so that's what I write here, 16. So that's kind of what completing the square is. Now the reason they call it completing the square, and I tell you it's a perfect square, it's called a perfect square trinomial. If I had you factor this now, if I said, hey guys, do a factor box for this, and you guys did this, you factored it, you had x squared, you had 16, and you have your 8x. Okay, so the x squared is x and x, and the 16 is, you can either be 8 and 2, but if this case really it's 4 and 4. 4 times 4 is 16. So you have 4x and 4x. Now the deal is, these are the same. X plus 4, x plus 4. So if I factor, it would be x plus 4 times x plus 4, which would give me x plus 4 squared. And that's what I mean by a perfect square. That is completing the square. So you're not really even worrying about this. I'm just trying to show you that that's why we call it completing the square, because after I factored it and I got this guy right here, the x squared plus 8x plus 16, okay, that can be factored to x plus 4 times x plus 4, or x plus 4 quantity squared. Okay, so really what I want you guys to be able to do though is this right here, okay, half of the middle term, square it, and you add it to both sides. If you can get that, and I got a couple more things to show you, you're gonna be good to go, okay, but you got to practice this. Okay, so let's try another problem here. Just again, a real basic one, and then I'll give you something that we're actually doing the whole problem. So here it is. If I say x squared minus 10x, and then plus some number. So again, I'm going to put that in red here because this is what we're going to figure out. Okay, so remember what you're going to do. You're going to take half of this term right here, so half of negative 10, which is negative 5, and then you're going to square it. Okay, and if you want to put it in your calculator, it's great. Just be careful. Make sure that number is always going to be positive. So if you would just put negative 5 and hit squared, you would get negative 25, but it's not negative 25, it's positive. Always, always, always positive. So anyway, that's 25, right? Negative 5 squared is 25. So that's what goes in this blank right here. That's completing the square. So once again, if I would factor this, do a factor box, I would get x minus 5 quantity squared, because it would be x minus 5 times x minus 5. Okay? So as long as you get this, half of that middle term, and then you square it, then you're kind of good to go. Okay, so let's actually do a real problem here. So it'll say solve the equation by completing the square. Solve the equation by completing the square. Okay. So here we go. X squared plus 6x plus 3 is equal to 10. All right, so you got to write these steps down. I'll write the steps down at the end, all the steps I need to do, but I want to do a couple examples. The first step we're going to do is you're going to subtract 3, because what you want to do is you want to get this all by itself. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and I get x squared plus 6x equals 10 minus 3 is 7. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take half of this, so half of 6 is 3. What I want you to do with that 3, and you'll notice in my answer key I do it, I want you to circle it, because we're going to use that number. All right, and then you're going to square it, and then you get 9. So what you're going to do is, let me just get rid of this one little thing right here. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to add 9 to both sides now. Okay, it's important, because remember how we added 9 here? Well, you can't just add 9 randomly. You got to add it to both sides so it balances out. So again, I added this 9 to both sides. So I took half of that middle term, which was 3. I squared it, got 9, and then I added it to both sides. Okay? Now, the reason I circled this, see that 3 right there? I'm going to write this as x, and see it's positive 3, x plus 3. So literally that 3, this 3 right here, on the right here, is this 3 here, the plus 3. Okay, that's exact, that transfers right over there. Okay, so it's x plus 3 squared equals 7 plus 9 is 16. Okay, so that's what you need to get, is you got x plus 3 quantity squared equals 16. And now, once you're at this point, guys, it's like last night's homework. Okay, so you guys really should be good at last night's homework. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take the square root of both sides, and you're going to get x plus 3 equals, square root of 16 is 4, so don't forget it's plus or minus 4. So we have two answers here. Let me write over here. You're going to have x plus 3 equals 4, and x plus 3 equals negative 4. Okay, so you're going to subtract 3 from both sides, x equals 1, and subtract 3 from both sides here, x equals negative 7. And those are your two answers. Okay, so up to this point, right, this is old stuff right here. This is all old, this is stuff we did yesterday. Okay, this is the new stuff. This is completing the square right here, completing the square. Okay, and then we did like half of that, so that's all, this is all completing the square. Okay, so let's try another problem. All right, cool. So as I said, at the end I think I'll write down the steps, but you know, for now I just want to just try another problem here. Okay, here we go. So we have x squared minus 12x minus 4 equals 4. Okay, the first step is you got to isolate this. Has to be isolated. Okay, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I get x squared minus 12x equals 8. All right, so now I'm going to take, right here, I'm going to take half of that. So let's write it out. Half of negative 12. Don't say x. I don't even know why I started to write x. I think because I said it. Okay, so take half of negative 12, which is negative 6. Circle it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to erase this little circle here so we don't get confused. So I'm going to circle it, and then I'm going to square it. And negative 6 squared is 36. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. Okay, and then I'm going to have something in parentheses squared, and it's going to be x. See that circle right there? That goes right here. X minus 6 quantity squared. That's why I have you circle. When I tell you to take half of it, that's why I have you circle it, so then you can put it over as x minus 6. If this was a negative, let's say it came out to be negative 10, it would be x minus 10. Let's say it was positive 10. That would be x plus 10. It was negative 1,000. It'd be x minus 1,000 quantity squared. Okay, so whatever this number is, whatever half of that is, that's the number that's going to go right here. Okay? And that equals 8 plus 36, which is 44. Okay, so let me get rid of some of this stuff here. All right. So now, once you have that, you do what you did last night. Okay? You do the square root method. So we take the square root of both sides. So the square root of x minus 6 quantity squared is x minus 6. Okay? And the square root of 44, so it's plus or minus. Don't forget the plus or minus. If you want to break it up, it's 2 times 2 times 11. So the 2's come out. So you have x minus 6 equals plus or minus 2 root 11. And my last step is to add 6 to both sides. So you get x equals 6 plus or minus 2 root 11. We're done with the problem. Okay? It's not bad. All right, so let's keep going here. This one's a little, it's got one extra step here, guys. One extra little step. So, like I said, I'm going to do this problem, and actually I'm going to do 3 more problems. So this one's got the extra step, but then I'm going to write down the actual step so you can see what it is, okay? So, it starts out with 4x squared minus 16x plus 8 equals 0. So here's the deal. Before you can start this problem out, this x squared needs to be a 1x squared. It has to be, it can't have a number in front of it. Okay, whether it's 1 or nothing in front of it, it can't have a number in it. So the only way to get rid of that 4 is I divide everything by 4. Okay, so let me kind of erase a couple things here. All right, so I'm going to divide everything by 4. So divide by 4, 4, 4, and 4. So then I'm going to get x squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so that was my first step. The next step is I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. Right? You got to isolate that x squared minus 4x. So you get x squared minus 4x, and that equals negative 2. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take half of that, so half of negative 4, which is negative 2, and then you're going to circle that, and then you're going to square it. It gives you 4. So what you're going to do is you're going to write this as x squared minus 4x, and now you're going to add 4 to both sides. Negative 2 plus 4. And remember, this becomes parenthesis x, and remember, that's why I had you circle this, x minus 2 squared. And then negative 2 plus 4 is 2. Okay? Not bad. Now it's last night's homework. Take the square root of both sides. So I get x minus 2 equals plus or minus root 2. And my last step is add 2 to both sides. So x equals 2 plus or minus root 2. Okay? So that was the only additional step here, math fans, is dividing that by 4. Right, to get that coefficient to be 1 in front. And everything else is normal, completing the square. Okay? 2 more to do with you guys. I said my very last one, I will write down the steps for you. Okay, so hopefully you'll have that in your notes. All right. So we have x squared plus 10x plus 18 equals negative 23. Okay, that x squared is, I got a 1 in front of it, so I don't have to do anything fancy. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 18. So you get x squared plus 10x is equal to negative 41. Okay, remember this guy right here. I'm going to take half of 10, which is 5, and I'm going to circle it. And then I'm going to square it, and I get 25. So I add 25 to both sides. So what does this give me? Remember, it's x, that's why I circled it, x plus 5 quantity squared. Okay? So that it's plus 5. Again, if that was -8, it would be x minus 8 quantity squared. Okay, whatever number is circled, that's what goes in that spot for x plus minus whatever it is. Okay, so that equals -41 plus 25 is -16. So what I'm going to do is now, this is last night's homework, take the square root of both sides. Square root of x plus 5 squared is just x plus 5. That's always really easy. The square root of 16, remember, there's an I that comes out of it, and its square root of 16 is 4, so that's actually 4i. And your last step is to, it's plus or minus, by the way. Don't forget that. And your last step is to subtract 5. So x comes out to be -5 plus or minus 4i. You can't combine that together. That's it. So that's your answer. -5 plus or minus 4i. Okay? Okay, so here's the last problem. And again, I'm going to have you guys, I'm going to write down some steps on the side just to make sure you guys are kind of good to go with how to do all these problems. Okay? So it's got everything to it. So here it is. 2x squared minus 16x plus 56 equals 0. Okay, so the first step is the x squared has to have a coefficient of 1. So that x squared, let me just say that 2x squared really needs to be just x squared. It's got to be like a 1 here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide all terms by 2. Divide by 2, divide by 2, everything by 2. So that's my first step. So I get x squared minus 8x plus 28 equals 0. Okay? Second step is isolate the x squared minus 8x. Okay, so that's one side and everything else on the other. So this is like the numbers. So in this case, I'm going to subtract, kind of put a few things, subtract 28 from both sides. So subtract 28. So you get x squared minus 8x equals -28. Okay, the third step is you're going to take half of the x term, which in this case is half of -8, which is -4. Okay, you're going to circle the -4. So I'm just going to do it right here. Circle it, then square it. Now take the square root of it, square it. So I'm going to say -4 squared, and then I get 16. So the fourth step is that 16, so you're going to add 16 to both sides of the equation. So watch this. Here, I'm going to do it in red just so you see it. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. Okay? And then the fifth step is that number I circled. So I'm going to just draw that. So that -4 that I circled, you're going to write as x, and then that -4 goes right in there, -4. So here it is. I'm doing it over here now. I'll do it in red. You're going to say x minus 4, and then of course it's squared. Okay, equals, and then you say -28 plus 16, which is -12. Okay, so there's all my steps here. And then the sixth step is solve like day 2 notes, which is just yesterday's stuff. Okay, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and I'm going to get x minus 4 equals plus or minus square root of negative 12. And the square root of negative 12 is square root of negative 1, or you can just pull an I out, and then it's 2 times 2 times 3. So that square root of negative 1 is I, the 2 comes out, so I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus 2I root 3. Because I took the 2's out and the negative 1. Okay, I'm going to move this down a little bit to have a little more room. So I get, my very last step here is just literally just add 4 to both sides. So x equals 4 plus or minus 2I root 3. And that's the answer to that problem. Okay, so again, look, just putting those steps up there. So basically just, again, follow it along. So just really quickly to recap here, we need that 2x squared to be a 1x squared. So that's the first step. Divide everything by 2. Okay. The next thing is we need to get that x squared minus 8x all together by itself. And so I'm going to subtract the 28 to move that over and get it all by itself. So here it is. Isolate it. And so you're subtracting 28 from both sides. Okay. The third step is you take half of that x term, which half of negative 8 is negative 4, and you square it, which turns out to be 16. So that's I'll do that in green. That's going to black it out now. Yeah. Okay. Change the colors back here again. Okay. So I'm going to, so again, here, this is the third step. Back to green. Okay. And again, half of that middle term, and then you circle it, and then you square it. Because when you square it, then you're going to add that 16 like I did here. You're going to add that to both sides of the equation. Okay. And then you're going to take that negative 4 that I came up, that I circled, and you're going to write that as, in this case, x minus 4 quantity squared. So here it is. Write as x minus 4 quantity squared. Okay, and then your last step, so again, I didn't really make the big deal of this, but you're basically taking that negative 28 plus 16, right, to give you the negative 12. And then your last step is to solve like day 2 notes. Okay, and use the square root method. All right, so anyway, I tried to make this really detailed. Hopefully you guys are good to go with that, but that is completing the square. So there are really 3 things that we've learned here so far. If you guys remember, day 1 was literally just factoring. It's stuff that we've done already back in the day. So it's factoring with x squareds and everything. So basically it's using factor boxes. Day 2 was using the square root method. So right, you move all just the squared stuff to one side and everything else to the other, and then you take the square root and you get plus or minus. Okay, so that's day 2, and then day 3 is completing the square. So that's what's going to happen. That's what the quiz is all about. You got 3 days worth of stuff, and like I said, you're just going to put it together. It's going to tell you which method to use, and you're going to use it. All right. So that's it, math fans. Hopefully you guys are good to go. Have an outstanding day. Adios. Goodbye.